Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow, the paranormal yacker. My guest today is best-selling, award-winning author Max Hawthorne, often referred to, and for good reason, as the Prince of Paleo-fiction. I'll be speaking with him about his popular Kronos Rising book series. Max Hawthorne, welcome to Paranormal Yacker.
Thank you so much, Stan. Thank you for having me.
You, Max, are an amateur paleontologist and a cryptid researcher. When did you first become interested in those areas? Was it a book or magazine article you read, a TV show or movie you watched as a youngster, or was it something else that sparked your interest?
There would be a different answer for both of those. The paleontology thing goes back to my earliest memories because my father, who owned a jewelry store, was also what they call a rock hound. That means he collected fossils, minerals, dealt with them, things of that nature. He had an extensive collection of impressive museum pieces and clients, including, I don't know if you know who this is, but he passed away like in 1970 or something like that, but his name was Sasha Semel. He was called the Tiger Man, and he was famous. We're talking a long time ago in the 30s, 40s, and 50s because he was the only white man to hunt man-eating jaguars in the Amazon with a spear. No rifle, a spear, if you can imagine that. So Sasha had his own museum of specimens, and he used to deal with my dad buying stuff from him. So the point is that when I was little, there was always stuff around. I remember it when I was like 4 or 5 years old. There were mammoth bones from a partial skeleton on top of the piano. I mean, giant bones look like they belonged to a brontosaurus or something like that. I was always exposed to megalodon teeth and trilobites and ammonites and you name it. And then when I was a kid, I would be building my Aurora prehistoric scenes models. I don't know if that's before your time or not, but they were quite popular. And I watched obviously all the Ray Harryhausen movies and things of that nature. So I grew up with a healthy interest in paleontology. And of course, as you know, I write paleo-fiction novels. So there's a tremendous amount of research that comes with that. In fact, that's actually how I ended up kind of developing paleo theories because I would do so much research. Like, for example, in my novels, the apex predator in the series are these extinct marine reptiles called pliosaurs. And pliosaurs are a type of plesiosaur, but unlike the Nessie Loch Ness monster version people envision, they don't have a small head and a long neck. They have a huge crocodile-like skull, a short neck, and then that body that looks sort of like a sea turtle, but with four big flippers and a short tail. So when you're dealing with these animals, my first book, I was going on the known literature in terms of how they swam, which never sat right for me. And I ended up theorizing on it and developed what appears to be the correct theory of plesiosaur locomotion in terms of how the flippers work together. And I mean, like I wrote a paper on it with two paleontologists, which is more viewed, I think, than any other plesiosaur paper in the world. So that was great. The cryptid part came with doing book research, 100%, because when I was researching, for example, the first Kronos Rising novel, I was dealing with sightings to try and relate the past to the present and to, of course, create interest in the public that maybe these things are really out there. That always obviously is something that people are interested in. So there were sightings like, I think it was the U-571, a U-boat from World War I that sank a British steamer. And when the steamer sank, it apparently was carrying munitions, which exploded. And a tremendous tumult of water came up like a geyser, and it threw a 60-foot marine reptile into the air. And this is an animal that was described as looking like a crocodile with webbed feet. And it came crashing down, lay there on the surface, and then sank from sight. Either it recovered and it swam away or it died, God forbid. But point being, so historically, there were many sightings of things like this. And I gradually got into more and more sightings, and I met more and more people in it and so forth. But I've had sightings of my own, and that just came along with part of it. So eventually, I wrote a whole cryptid book where I interviewed people, including some that nobody even knew were still alive. People that had, I mean, one guy was attacked by a sea monster in 1976. And I also got to interview the partner of the man who, Gary LaMotta's partner, who saw a 38-foot turtle off the coast of Vancouver. I put all this together into a book called Monsters and Marine Mysteries, which was a #1 Amazon bestseller.
Kronos Rising Purgatory, a fast-paced sci-fi suspense thriller, is a real nail-biter in the latest book in your Kronos Rising series. Could you, Max, give me a synopsis of the storyline for Purgatory?
You know what I'm going to do? I will actually go to Amazon and read the synopsis that's on there. It's a little succinct, so this way I don't end up rambling and such. The whole series, as you know, I already mentioned, was based around the notion of these pliosaurs still being alive in the present. That was the idea, was introducing an apex predator, an extinct animal, into the current ecosystem and what would come of that, especially in our oceans where sharks many have been almost wiped out. Whales are still down to like 10% of their previous numbers. So when you take a giant whale-sized marine predator like that and you put it in a new environment, it's going to do what any other predator is going to do. It's going to explore, it's going to feed, and it's going to breed if possible. So the whole story was centered around trying to stop the initial one, and then things spiraling out and then multiplying and taking over the world's oceans. And then the book got into, with the Kraken series, of other monsters coming in up from the depths that were disturbed by these new creatures, and research being done on pliosaurs and experiments on people with pliosaur DNA. And I mean, it really, like, you have to grow the universe when you do it. So it's like you had Alien, the first movie, then you had Aliens, and things go and grow and grow from there. Of course, the first two movies were obviously the best, but I'm sorry. So the synopsis for Kronos Rising Purgatory is pretty short. Tartarus's reactor still burns in the aftermath of the Kraken's fury as a reborn Jake Braddock steps out of the Remora submersible with murder on his mind. He finds himself in the last place he expected to be, Diablo Caldera, the savage Cretaceous-era island where the pliosaurs infesting the world's oceans came from. Undeterred, the 7-foot man reptile advances, but his plan to exact revenge upon the man who ruined his life and murdered the woman he loves runs into a brick wall, a wall with teeth. Diablo's primeval jungles are infested with legions of Homo sauridae, the man-eating creatures created as a result of Eric Grayson's vile experiments. Jake soon finds himself embroiled in a bloody fight for his life. The bipedal saurians are a mindless, slavering mob. They cannot be reasoned with. Even worse, they're starving, and Jake is on the menu. So basically, from that synopsis, Tartarus is a research facility where they were performing experiments on pliosaurs to turn them into bioweapons. But the idea, I'm doing spoilers here, unfortunately, but it won't ruin things for people, I think. So, like, for example, the Navy was buying these creatures, and better to spend $5 million on a pliosaur the size of a whale, that if a terrorist boat laden with explosives was about to ram an aircraft carrier, the pliosaur would intercept it to kill the people on there. And even if it was killed in an explosion, it would be much better than the damage that a carrier might take, for example. So that was why that was going on. The Remora is a submersible. Diablo Caldera is a Cretaceous-era island, a caldera. That's like a volcano that's missing the top 2/3 from eruptions and magma collapse. And that is where these animals came from. I can give you the backstory on that. And Jake, when it says 7-foot man reptile, has been mutated by experiments done on him. So he's no longer human. He's like half human, half reptile. And then you have these Homo sauridae, which, by the way, helps when you can write a paleontology paper, for example, academia-wise. I can invent my own Latin names for creatures. So Homo sauridae basically mean man lizard. And these creatures are cast-offs that Eric Grayson experimented on, and the experiments failed, and they turned into these man-eating, mindless things. And they dumped hundreds and hundreds of them on this island just to hide them, to get rid of them, like a dumping ground, let's say, or something like that. So they're there, and when Jake ends up on the island, these things are like, lunch, and then it turns into this whole long novella. So it's like a 100-page fight for survival of the most gritty, gory, tension-filled kind you can possibly imagine. I mean, you can see the reviews. Obviously people are enjoying the book.
What, Max, is the creative process you use in the writing of your books? Your characters, themes, storylines are so imaginative and unique. I was wondering if the ideas just pop into your mind. Do you meditate on them, dream them, or are they channeled from a higher source?
It's a complex question. For example, the first Kronos Rising book was in my head 25 years ago, easily. And I know what inspired it because I still have the magazine that did. And my idea was, I'm sure it was Jaws inspired, once again, what would happen if these animals were around. And then with it came the idea of how to explain their existence in the world today without them being seen all these thousands of years. So I had that in my head also. But the actual ideas, you just kind of put these things together. I get ideas from all sorts of stuff. My brain is constantly cranking them out. It's bad in terms of sleep because I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, which happened this this morning at 3:15, which is why I'm so tired looking. And I was like, wow, that's a great story. So I grabbed my phone, which is on the nightstand, and I start sending myself text messages or emails and stuff with notes and all this other stuff like that. And sometimes there's so much of it that I'm wide awake and I can't get it back to sleep. And I'll come downstairs and write an actual outline, sometimes for a whole book. But I mean, I get ideas in my sleep. I get ideas when I'm awake. It's like just, I can't explain it. I never have writer's block. Never. What I have is sleep deprivation. And that's the only thing that slows my roll, so to speak, where I'm so exhausted I can't write. If you can't write, your brain just doesn't function. See, when I write a scene, and my scenes are very visual, I guess you'd say, very detailed, very realistic. Part of that probably comes from the fact that my degree was in film and animation. So I was an artist before I became an author. So I can draw, paint, sculpt, you name it. So the whole world, I can visualize. So I take what I see in my mind and I transpose it into the written word, and that creates the visual for the readers. They seem to be happy with it, so can't complain.
Earlier in our interview, you told me you personally experienced encounters with cryptids. Could you tell me about those encounters?
Well, there's, I think, 4 of them. Let's see. I don't know if we'll be able to squeeze them all in, but we'll certainly give it the old college try. The most recent one, and this one is nowhere near as intense as the others, I guess you'd say, but it was the most recent, and that took place November of 2021. So not this past November, but the one before. I live in a nice development, but it's surrounded by woods. If I look to my right, especially in the morning early, if I'm up in the middle of the night or the crack of dawn, as I said, and stuff, and I look out my windows, the trees are 50 feet away, and then sometimes there's a herd of deer right in the tree line or going through my backyard. I have opossums, I have raccoons, I have a very large bobcat I call Robert. Get it, Bob, cat, Robert, ha ha ha, etc. I've had mule deer, whitetails, wild turkey, sometimes a couple dozen. It's a zoo. When I go out by my front, at the end of my driveway is where obviously you put the trash and recycling. And then maybe 60, 70 feet to my left, up the street, it comes to a little dead end, is the woods once again. So I'm just setting the stage for you. I had taken the trash. I know it was a Sunday night, and around 10 o'clock, maybe 10:30, my wife was like, oh, here's the stuff from the litter robot. So we have these 2 very large cats, Siberian forest cats. One may show up here and interrupt our interview at some point, but they're big and fluffy and gorgeous and whatever. But 20-pound cats poop. So we have these 2 litter robots, and like once or twice a week, my wife will give me a trash bag with 15 or 20 pounds of cat poop in it that has to go in the trash. So that Sunday, she goes, oh, here, you forgot to take out the cat poop. I said, so I was like, all right, whatever. So I go walk outside, and I'm walking down the driveway, and I get to the bottom of the driveway. Now it's pitch black, like across the street, you can't see anything. And off to the left, you could see some trees, but it's very, very dark. I lift up the trash can lid, and I go to put it in, and something from right across the street, I guess at the tree line, it growls at me. Okay, and this sounded very big and very scary and very threatening. I'm going to try and imitate it, but it was like this, like that. But it ended very wetly, like it was drooling. And it was big enough that you could feel under your feet, you could feel a little shimmy through the asphalt, which tells you there's a very large animal or whatever it was. And it was very scary. I was unarmed. And I'm standing there holding a bag of cat shit, excuse my French, as a weapon. And I'm like, that's nice. Okay. I drop it in, I close the lid, and I'm taking my eyes away, and I back slowly up the driveway into the house. So then I tell my wife what happened, and she goes, maybe we should get a flashlight and go look for it. I'm like, that's a great idea. So I get my sidearm, because we have carry permits here, and a flashlight, and I go back. And I get to the end of the driveway, and I walk into the middle of the street. I was not about to approach the tree line, and I shine my light like this, back and forth. And I'm like, and I could feel it was there, whatever it was, watching me. But I was like, come on, come and get some, whatever. I'm not going to be punked in front of my driveway, but nothing happened. So then I cautiously, once again, I wasn't turning my back when it went back inside and whatever. After that, I looked up sightings in the area, and Doylestown, which is only a few miles from where I live, had in the last 5 years 3 different sightings of this creature they call Dogman in and around that town, which is only, like I said, as the crow flies, maybe 4 miles, 5 miles away. A lot of woods, like I said, around there. And this is like families have seen these things like run across the road in front of them and then leap 20 feet into the trees. This kind of crazy stuff. So I'm like, I don't know about all this stuff. I'm not really buying that. I don't think evolution would create such a creature, but, stranger things have happened. So then I said, I'm going to see what this really was. So I got a camera trap, trail camera. Okay. And I went into the woods and I set it up on a tree. I realized realized, though, before I did this, why this thing, whatever it was, showed up. Because I have a habit at nighttime of walking around the neighborhood late at night, going for walks for exercise. When I was doing one of these walks, and my walks will be an hour long sometimes, I had only been out there for 10 minutes and I had to take a leak, for want of a better word. And rather than go into the house and be all sweaty and disheveled and take off my coat and all this stuff like that, I had walked into the woods. There's a little footpath there. And I went into the woods like 40 or 50 feet, and there was a fallen tree, and I christened it, and I went back on my way. Animals, as you know, use urine to mark their territory. And I believe that this thing, or whatever it was, or animal, took that as a challenge. You're invading my space. You're trying to encroach my territory. This is mine. And it was literally the next day. It could probably tell I was the same person, especially after I peed myself when it growled at me. I didn't actually, but you know what I'm saying. But anyway, I think it was like warning me. Like I said, it sounded very threatening. So I put this trail camera out there for like several weeks, and I kept getting, and I peed on the tree where the trail camera was because I wanted to attract this thing. Although I believe that predators can see the infrared beams on these trail cameras. I'm sure they can, because I had foxes walk right up and stare right at it. They can see it. So I got dozens and dozens and dozens of animals. I got tons of deer, raccoons, foxes, you name it, possums, etc. Several times there were whitetails where the deer would be there, and then all of a sudden it turned and looked at something and it ran for its life. I mean, just bolted like this and stuff. Even one during the day where a deer was running as if something was chasing it. It was doing like 30 through the woods like this. You could tell it was terrified, but whatever it was didn't come into camera view. But I kept looking and looking, seeing this stuff. So on the 28th, I think it was, of December of 2021, once again, I went back there because I saw when one of the deer ran, I had seen these weird marks in the video that looked like maybe footprints or something like that. I wasn't sure. There was a lot of leaf litter back there. And as I went back there and I was looking around and I saw a bunch of these marks, and there was one where the soil was just exposed. Most of them it wasn't. And I moved a leaf or two and I found a track, but it was claw marks. There were like 4 or 5 of them, like into the ground. And it looked like something had dug into the leaf litter to propel itself forward, and it had non-retractable claws, and the claws had torn through. Now, this is almost January, so you understand the soil was hard, like icy hard. So it didn't leave a print, but it left like these claw marks as it ripped through the leaf litter or whatever and stuff. And I took a picture of it. And that track, I didn't measure it, but going by leaf of a known species that's right on it, it's anywhere from 6 to 10 inches wide, and average is probably 8, considering an average size leaf. So that's a very wide track if you think about it, especially for something that has non-retractable claws. The claw pattern looked like a bear or a wolf, maybe something like that, but a bear that with 8-inch wide tracks would dwarf any black bear. Even 6 inches is like black bear maximum, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, it would be a giant black bear. And this was more likely grizzly size, and there's no grizzlies in Pennsylvania. So I have no idea what did this. But the only other thing I could tell you relative to that is I saw a video recently, and I posted it on my Monsters and Marine Mysteries Facebook page. They're on a road or a highway, and this giant black wolf climbs over the railing and walks across the road staring at the person filming it. And in the video, it growls at the person and it keeps going. Now, I don't know if the growl is something that happened or if somebody added it later on. But when I heard it, that growl sounds almost identical to what I heard when I was out there that night. So I don't know. I don't know what it was. This is a more ambiguous experience than the other 3 things that I've experienced. Let's put it that way. But it was scary because, like I said, when you have something really big from the dark saying, I'm going to get you, like this type of stuff, it's kind of scary, especially when you're holding cat poop.
According to the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History, the biggest white sharks can reach up to 20 feet long. You, Max, have a documentary on concrete evidence of a 32-foot white shark. When and where was it found?
The documentary is on my YouTube channel. People want to see it, which is, I think, called, shows you I have so much stuff going on, I can't remember everything. Max Hawthorne's, I think it's book trailers and videos or something like that. But it's called Mega Shark or Megalodon What Killed This Whale. That's the title of the documentary, so people should be able to find it. What happened is this happened this past July, and some friends of mine out of Nova Scotia, they're on Briar Island, and they get a lot of whale carcasses that come in there. And sometimes these whale carcasses have large bites taken out of them. Sometimes they have exceptionally large bites taken out of them. And I mean, like when I did Monsters and Marine Mysteries, I have a whole chapter on mega sharks. And this new one is not in the book, but there is one from Briar Island with photos, etc., of a dead humpback whale, 52-foot whale, and it was, I think, killed by a ship strike. And there were bite marks on that whale that overwhelmingly suggest a white shark 26 feet long. Just for starters, just to tell you that, like without a body, obviously nobody's going to fully believe you, but the bite marks were 27 inches wide, and I believe the larger one, they were two from the same shark. Obviously, the gape varies with the shark, how wide it opens its mouth, but one was 31 inches tall and the other was like 37 inches tall. So that right there is a monster shark. But this past July, a subadult humpback that was around 30 feet long washed up. Before it washed up, my friend's wife, Amy Tudor is her name. She is a naturalist. She was out at sea with a whale watching company, and she took photos of the carcass while it was still fresh. So Amy took some incredible pictures of this dead whale, which were very useful in the documentary because I was able to compare the fresh bite marks, etc., and such to the remains that washed ashore a week or two later where it was more decayed. And then her husband, Jess, who's called the bone collector, he's collected skeletons. He dissects whales that have come beached and such. He went to the carcass. When he saw the carcass, he sent me videos and stuff. And as it was panning, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm like, what was that right there? And on the tail region, the coda region near the peduncle, which is what the stalk-like end of the whale's tail where it connects to the flukes, there was this huge chunk of flesh taken out. Jess had initially thought that was like from a propeller, but I'm like, it looks like tooth marks to me on the edge and stuff. And so I asked him to go back and do measurements and all this other stuff. It got very complex. It's all explained in the video. But the bottom line is that there are at least two visible bites on the whale. One that's visible on it when it's at sea, near the wound on its shoulder. It was hit by a boat propeller, and that's what either killed it or slowed it down so that the shark could get it. And then it had a second bite, like I said, on the caudal region near the flukes. I theorize that it's possible that it was wounded by propeller from a small ship or a large boat, and the blood, of course, attracted sharks. And I think because it was so badly hurt, this mega shark which would be a slow swimming animal, honestly, at that size and with a cartilage skeleton. They just aren't very fast. You could see whale sharks and everything else like that, but it was able to catch and finish off the whale. And its first bite was to the tail region, which is what sharks are known to do, because they try and incapacitate their prey. They want to take out your means of locomotion, which is the flukes. When the prey can't swim, it's helpless and it's just going to bleed out and die. White sharks do that with elephant seals, which are as big as them. They bite them in the haunch. They want to avoid the teeth and then wait for the elephant seal to die, etc. So that was where I think the first bite happened. And then, like I said, there's another monstrous bite further up around here. I was able to crunch the numbers, and the bites appeared to be at least a yard wide. So think about that. That's 36 inches. And these are bites. There are tooth gouges you can see and all sorts of stuff. It's all in the video. Very compelling stuff. And I was able to crunch the numbers using the most conservative formulas available. With those, it indicates a shark at least 32 feet long. When I say at least, that's because the bite may have been compressed a little bit this way, because when whales die, their flesh and blubber starts to decay. It becomes a little amorphous, and you could see that the stuff had started to slide down a little. In the video, I say it's like your sock. If you have a sock and it's soaked with sweat or something like that, or wet, and it starts to come down and like mush up a little, but the bite is at least 3 feet across. We're being conservative, which indicates a 32 plus foot animal, which is gigantic.
Since you have an abundance of knowledge on dinosaurs and have researched them extensively, I would like to know, Max, if you've heard any buzz from the scientific community of them being close to extracting DNA from dinosaur fossils, which, of course, if they did, could lead to cloning them.
I'm aware of the study they've done where they've cut open like T-Rex thigh bones and stuff and found potential like collagen or something inside there, which was quite shocking. Whether or not that leads to complete DNA or whether we have the technology to do that remains to be seen. I've never heard anybody come out and say anything along that. I know they're experimenting with chickens and playing around, playing God with them, giving them tails and teeth and things of that nature. I mean, realistically speaking, ultimately, it's a matter of technology and time. It will happen, in my opinion. I mean, look what goes on in the world around us. People creating super viruses and everything else under the sun, for God's sake. Once DNA is completely mastered, I would imagine you could one day create a dinosaur out of scratch. Like, just make it anything you want. Oh, we're going to create Godzilla, or something like that. I don't know if we'll live to see it, especially a man of my advanced years being a senior citizen and all that. But, God willing.
When that day comes, when dinosaurs are cloned, do you, Max, think it would be a good or bad thing? Do you feel it's best that we leave Mother Nature alone and let the dinosaur fossils remain undisturbed as they have been for 65 million years? Or would there be some kind of benefit for mankind if we did clone them?
I think that the first thing that should be done is the human race should right the wrongs that we've done. And that means animals like the great auk, all those giant tortoises that like sailors butchered and brought on ships and stuff to kill and eat later on, the passenger pigeon, the Tasmanian tiger, so many species that we've exterminated in the last few decades, few hundred years. The moa, for God's sake, we're like a plague sometimes. And all these animals, the dodo, there's another one. For God's sake. My friend George Donde, who's a world champ taxidermist, by the way, created for, I think it was the Museum of Natural History in New York, the most beautiful, realistic, like live-looking dodo taxidermy recreation you could imagine. But I think those should be done first, honestly. And they would be easier because I'm sure there's more DNA to be found, easier to work with. But to answer your question, I'm not trying to dodge the bullet or anything like that. As Kronos Rising has shown, if you release a super predator into an ecosystem, then you have to be prepared for the consequences of that. Invasive species like pythons in Florida and things of that nature can get out of control. If you've seen like in the most recent Jurassic World movies, how one or two dinosaurs can all of a sudden be taking over the planet makes no sense. You'd need a big breeding population and you need hundreds and then thousands of these things for that to happen, which takes a long time. So more likely if you had something like that, it would be for instance, where you'd have like a park that might have a few of these animals. If one got out and wreaked havoc, something like the old sci-fi movies, The Lost World. Remember the old one, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's old one, Willis O'Brien did stuff. A lone dinosaur rampaging through the streets of Philadelphia, for example, would make for an interesting experience, but I don't see them being a threat to the human race.
Kronos Rising Purgatory is book 6 in the Kronos Rising series. Is there a book 7 on the horizon?
Of course. If I stop writing these books, I'll be lynched. I may do novellas for ease while doing other projects and stuff like that. But I mean, people, they just want more. They just do. That's very flattering. They want to know what happens to these characters. They become very invested in the characters. Even Jake, who's now half reptile, people care about what happened to him. I wrote Purgatory primarily because everybody wanted to know. The last time we saw Jake was at the end of Kraken 3, and he had stowed away aboard this submersible where his arch enemy, his nemesis, was using it to escape that facility I told you about, Tartarus, which was in flames, and there was a Kraken invading it, death and destruction and radiation and all this stuff. And he went on there to kill this guy. And the sub was on autopilot, ended up back at Diablo Caldera. And then when we last saw Jake, he was casually pursuing Eric Grayson, his nemesis, into the jungle. And then these screams and cries of all these monsters, these creatures coming after them, you knew it was coming and he was preparing to defend himself. And that's how things left off. And you can't leave people with a cliffhanger like that. They're like, I gotta know. Come on, man, don't leave us hanging and stuff. Hence the book. But there's so much to be explored. There's so many openings and avenues. It's a whole universe, So I think there might be 7 books in the series. Let me think about this. Because there's Kronos Rising, there's the 3 Kraken books, so that's 4. Then you've got Plague, Purgatory, that's 6, and Diablo. See, Amazon, because Diablo is like a prequel, they won't count it as part of the series, which is retarded, in my opinion. I know it's a politically incorrect term, but whatever. Like, it's like the story of what happens on that island before the eruption that frees the monsters. So why wouldn't that be part of the series?
Sure.
It's also a very popular book. So there's that also.
Great. Should viewers of Paranormal Yacker want to buy Kronos Rising, Purgatory, or any of the other books in the series, or learn about your other books, all of which I find fascinating and would love to interview you about on future shows, how can they do that?
Amazon obviously is going to have everything from audibles to ebooks, hardcovers, whatever, all that jazz. So, I mean, you can go on there and you can look up me as an author, Max Hawthorne, and I'm easy to find. Or you can look up the Kronos Rising series, although that won't show you everything. So I do have an author central page, I think they call it on there, which has everything. But I also encourage readers to go to my website. You can either go to kronosrising.com, and that's Kronos with a K, or maxhawthorne.com with with an E on the end, obviously. And if you go to the books page, that lists all the books there, synopsises, options, etc. There's also a free books page where you have free downloads. These are excerpts from a lot of the novels and such. So you can actually get a free taste of it, experience it, make sure you like it, make sure it's for you before you actually invest your hard-earned money. The great thing about like my Kindle books and stuff is most of them are cheaper than a gallon of gas. I'll trade you a Kronos Rising book for a dozen eggs. No. You're going to have to do at least 2 of those books. Come on. But anyway.
Max Hawthorne, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yakker. It has been great yakking with you.
It's my honor and privilege to be here, Stan. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. This is Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yakker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. To be sure, you're amongst the first to receive new interviews when they're released and to have access to previous ones, subscribe to my free YouTube channel. To do that, all you have to do is press the subscribe button on your screen.